You're listening to the Traffic and Conversion Show. I'm your host, Michelle Fernandez, and today I am super duper excited because joining me today is my son, Anthony Fernandez. During high school, he won several awards for being the on-air talent as an anchor, short and long form features on athletes, sports, and controversial topics. And at Florida State University, he was on camera talent for features that appeared on regional networks like Fox Sports Florida. And after college, he shifted his talents to behind the scenes. And Anthony landed his first job right out of college as a production assistant at ESPN. Anthony is a natural storyteller, and his experience of on camera and behind the scenes in production of interviewing influential and inspirational people from professional athletes to local heroes. He has the natural ability to get people feeling comfortable, knows what questions to ask, and how to bring their story together to make their stories impactful. Today is all about how to get the most of your interviews. So stay tuned. Hey there, it's Michelle. Welcome back to the show. And today joining me is the one and the only Anthony Fernandez. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thanks. I love the intro. It's good to be here. Finally, we've been talking about doing this for a long time. So
I
I'm glad.
know. I think it's been like what, 2 years now?
Has it been that long?
I think so. Because you were
Probably.
still in college when we were talking about this. So I
Yeah.
am so excited that we were finally able to make this happen. Now, I mean, not because I'm your mom, but you are like an amazing human being, right? And I mean, we talk about this all the time, your dad and I. It's like your teachers, other parents, your friends even come up and tell us on how great you are. And you've really always just had like this drive that a lot of other people don't have, even as an adult. Like with me going on this journey and learning more on how to be a better person and, achieve your dreams and all that good stuff. It's like, I've always felt with you, you always know what you want and you always like, you get something in your mind and you just go after it. So can you start off by sharing like what does go through your mind when you're like, oh, I want to do this, right? Like
Yeah.
what?
I think growing up, I just always had like a positive mindset, like when it came to like accomplishing things or just going after things that I enjoyed doing. Um, like the thought process in my head was barely ever, oh, why can't I do this? Or like, will I be able to do this? It's like, give it a try, why not? And if it happens, it happens. So I think that's been the biggest thing for me. And then, just finding what, my niche is going to be and like what I'm going to go into and pursue for the rest of my life. I mean, it's just like, it's kind of like daunting when you think about it, but I don't know. I've just always had that mindset, and I think it speaks to like, like my upbringing and like, like being raised by like you and dad. It's just, I've always just had that positive mindset. I don't know if it's genetics, but I think it's really helped me like get to where I am now.
Well, yeah. And I mean, just as you were talking, like I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, like from, I think it was about second grade, I'm like, I'm going to put you in basketball camp. And it was at the all boys high school where you ended up going to high school, right? And you were like, I knew I wanted to go there. And the first day you came home, they were talking about this award, the sportsmanship award, I think it was, that they give every Friday or something like that, or at the end of every session. And you came home the first day and you're like, Mom, I'm going to get that award. And sure enough, in second grade, you went out and got that award. I was like, I just like, it's amazing to me. And even from, we're still talking about the young age, you've always known what you wanted to do, right? And like, you just hit on it. You're like, to know for the rest of your life. I remember in kindergarten, I don't know if you remember this either. Miss Casanova told you all had to write in your journal and journal every day, right? It was kind of to get you to write and I guess write and read and all that good stuff. And your journal consisted of sports teams. So no matter what was in season,
Right.
football, basketball, baseball, hockey, like, your journal consisted of the highlights, like what were the scores to the playoff brackets. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I would
It's
always,
funny. It's just funny because like I mean, whatever. Like I probably forgot about it. Like after a while, but then you go back and you like look through all the stuff that you wrote down, like all the misspellings, the way you, the way you spell everything growing up. Like you think you're a smart kid growing up, and then you read your journal that you you wrote it as a kid, and you're like you start to change change your mindset. But yeah, that like sports has always been a big part of my life, and I've always been interested in it. I used to bother the family with like saying, "Oh, who do you think's gonna win this playoff series, or who do you think's gonna win the Super Bowl?" And like you guys probably didn't care at the end of the day, but like I was just like I loved sports, and I just wanted to do what the people on Sports Center were doing, and the people that I watch on TV. I wanted to like kind of be a part of that in my own way. So yeah, like, that's funny that you brought up the journals.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
like I remember used to saying like we got the next Bob Costas on our hands, right? And that's what I always loved, and I was never concerned as a parent. Like you never change your mind. You've always stayed the course, and really, and again, speaking back to that drive, and it's like knowing what you're gonna do, and even within that whole industry, right? Because it's so big, it's like you still found your niche. And I'm sure even with what you're doing today, you're like, oh, like it's just limitless what I can do, because you are so talented both behind and in front of the camera. I mean, I know how amazing you are. So, can you share a little bit about you, your journey, and how you got to be where you are today?
Yeah, so on April 9th, 1999. No, so yeah, I mean, just for me, I grew up loving sports broadcasting. Like, would fight with my sister every morning, like to watch Sports Center in the morning versus cartoons, and I always had a passion for it, like just for broadcasting in general, and I think that turned into, you know, in middle school. I was a part of the magnet program, like at my middle school broadcasting. That translated into high school, and I was, I did the broadcast club at my high school at the time, and like did that for 4 years, and it like everything was just building up to like where I am now. Like after I graduated high school, I went to Florida State University, and did a lot of fun things, a lot of good things there, like having to do with my career. And I feel like everything kind of like built up to this moment that, like, even in like all the work I did in high school, it really prepared me for college because, like, while like people were learning like the new techniques and like everything that goes into this career, I feel like I kind of had a head start, doing these things in middle school and high school. And like it's funny, there was a class at Florida State I took it 5 times, and like
Not because you failed.
no, not because I failed. Got it. Good, good way to make that clear. No, but yeah, it was just one of those classes that you had the option to take it multiple times, and I was able to start that class early on because I had a broadcast reel like of me on camera and stuff like that from high school. So everything was building up to that moment, and then like it gave me the opportunity to take it for 5 straight semesters, and then all the extracurricular activities. I worked at Seminole Productions, which is the production company for Florida State that we did all the sporting events that you see on TV for like ACC Network and ESPN. We did a lot of those broadcasts out of our control rooms, which is like super hands-on experience. And like it was a huge resume builder, I feel like, and I feel like it was something that stood out, for like jobs that I applied to. And then once it came to time the time to graduate, I was kind of like, oh, like what do I do? Like, do I just go for it right away, or do I stay at Florida State and try to like keep building my resume and keep working? And then yeah, the opportunity just presented itself. I was thinking about staying there for a year. I got into grad school at Florida State, and then I was thinking about accepting it. And one day, like summer, I was scrolling through LinkedIn just looking for job postings, because really I wasn't really set, like heavy set on going to grad school. So, I was like, let me see what job opportunities are out there. And sure enough, a position for ESPN opened up on LinkedIn. And I was like, part of me was like, is this real? Like, does ESPN, like, do they, do they like do everything through LinkedIn? Like ESPN was such like a mystery to me. Like I wasn't sure how they did their recruiting and all that stuff. So I was just like, do I apply? Do I stay in Tallahassee for another year? And then I just decided, why not? Let's just apply for the job. The worst thing they say is no. The worst thing that happens is I don't get an email back, which has happened in the past. So I'm like, if it happens again, whatever, I'll just, keep moving on. And I think that goes back to that, like that positive mentality. It's like, you know, you got to have like some sort of faith in yourself, and you got to, keep pushing through. But yeah, so I applied to that job, went through the whole interview process, and then I ended up getting the job with ESPN. And then it's been a good ride so far. I've been with the company for a year now, so I think it all worked out for the best.
Mm-hmm. I want to unpack a couple of things that you just said. And one of the things, even going back to like your love of everything and your passion, taking this job for ESPN, you had to literally pack up everything and move to a whole different state and town where you knew not one soul. Like you didn't even know anybody at ESPN, right? So that right there takes a lot of courage and shows how much you really wanted this thing to move, what is it, a 10-hour drive ish, away from your family,
Yeah.
friends, and basically start a whole new life for your career. So
Mm.
that's something to be admired. And not a lot of people have the courage to do that, including your dad or I sometimes. Like we think about it. I might be a little bit more courageous to do that. Your dad, not so much. So these are times where your dad and I are like, wait, whose kid is this? How did he come from us? But I
Yeah.
wanted to unpack something. So first of all, when we did all the college road trip, I was so impressed. Well, first of all, the middle school did the best that they could. They had an excellent program, that magnet program. However, the technology was a little bit behind. It was a public school, not so much funding back there. But when you went to your high school, which was Christopher Columbus High School here in Miami, and it was like a real like news center, right? Like if we went to the local channel, NBC station, if you will, and they really gave you a lot of skills, because I remember going on the college tours, and they would talk to you about, oh, you're going to learn this, that, and the other, and you're like, oh, I already know that. I use that every day at my job, at my job, your school job, that you ran, being the anchor for the school and doing these packages, as you call them. So when you were talking about taking that class 5 times, the reason why I said you didn't fail is because in my mind, you are becoming a master. That is when you get to the level of mastery, where it's like, okay, I've learned this, and now I'm not only implementing it and using it every day. It's like, how can I get better and better and better at it? So I'm sure each time you took that class, you learned at least one thing new every time, or had a new experience that then gave you the confidence, the courage, or whatever else that went along. Am I right in saying that?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's like you you only know so much when you go into something, like based off of your own experiences. But then when you're interacting with other people who are also doing the same thing as you and have their own creative mindset, like that opens you up too, because you're like, oh, I didn't know you can do that with
Mm-hmm.
this software, or like this editing software. Or I didn't know like you can do that in a stand up when you're doing reporting. So it's like picking up, like trying to pick everybody's brains and like see what everybody does, like they're everybody's best thing that they do, and like trying to apply it to what you do as well. And I feel like I learned that like even in high school too. Like I was fortunate enough that CCNN Live, the broadcast program I was in high school, like we had a good reputation in the city. So we had the chance to talk to a lot of people like that were in the industry already. And then like from them like critiquing my things and like watching them, it just helps you build on everything. Like you can only learn so much on your own, which like, you
Mm-hmm.
can learn a lot on your own, but also you know you can learn a lot of things from other people too. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's been, and even now when I'm working like in my job now, like there's only so much I know, but like picking up things from like more experienced people and seeing how people got like the people above me that like got to where they are now. Like it's helping me realize, okay, this is what I have to do, and like this is what needs to happen if I want to get to the next point. And
Exactly. And one thing I also noticed about you is that you're so open and coachable to whatever, whether it be when you were playing baseball or even in your job now or growing, the whole your whole career. I say your career because I really think what you went through with middle school and high school is part of the whole
yeah,
process, and really doing things at a certain level that you do out of school, even out of college, right? Um, you were always open to receive what they're saying, and you never were like, they don't know what they're talking about, or mom, they were picking on me. You never once said that. You would take the information that they gave you, and you're like, how can I get it better next time? How can I not only meet the expectations but exceed what they expect of me, right?
right.
How can I go above? How can I make it my own, and again, it just goes to show you, this is me being a mom bragging, but just as a human being, what we're talking about, and what I learn from you every single day that we talk and you share experiences with me, I'm like, God, how can I be more like that? How can I think more like that? And just like, want to grow and succeed, and not let these other things go in mind. Take it to be like, this is all meant to be, and it's working for me,
Yeah, yeah.
Love.
It's just like I don't know. Like everybody always asks me like, oh, or people tell me like, oh, like not everything's all lollipops and rainbows and candy and everything. Like how like why are you so like like how are you so positive? Like they don't, like people don't like comprehend it, and I
It's
like
true.
personally I don't get it. Like I don't know. Like I'm like I don't know. Like I just do. Like I just don't have that mindset that it's just like not like there are some times where like oh like that's something that I have to like learn more about, or like I might not be able to do right now. But then I don't know, it's just like that's just how I am.
I
I
can
really
identify.
don't
I can
I don't know how to
identify
explain
it. One of the things that I can identify is that you do not ever. I don't think ever. Maybe sometimes when you had a couple of your surgeries, because you've come over through a lot of adversities. However, you never dwell on what is not. So you never let somebody saying like, oh, you just did that package, that was horrible. You don't dwell on how horrible it is. You say, okay, what do I need to do to get better? So a lot of people sit in that negativity, and then they let it fester and make it mean something that it really isn't. You just take the facts of what they're telling you, and then you go to make it better. So you never sit in any of this negativity, or any of you never let it get you down, or let it mean something that it doesn't.
yeah. And I mean that's something I've had to like build up over time and like come to learn. But I think something that I attribute to that is like playing sports growing up, and like doing like and like I say playing sports growing up, but also like that being in that broadcast program in high school, like that wasn't just like
Mm-mm.
go like get your camera and like shoot something and then bring it back and edit it together and everything's all fine. Like this was like we were getting critiqued as if this was like a regular news program, and like I just feel like growing up with that, it made me realize like I mean, especially playing sports in general, it's just like, all right, if a coach yells at you for something, like you have to fix it right away, right?
Right.
Like there's no like thinking like, oh, he just yelled at me. Like there's like, okay, like just fix it, like figure it out. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's just I feel like growing up with that, and then yeah, and just like being well, like I feel like I was fortunate enough to be like well coached, and um like I wasn't coaches weren't just yelling at me for no reason, right? Like they were yelling at me because like there's something that needs to be fixed, and so like I have to go and get it done. So it wasn't more of like a, oh, he yelled at me, so I have to I'm sitting out for the rest of practice because I quit because he like yelled at me. It's like, no, like fix it now or he's gonna
Right.
yell at you again. So,
You didn't want to get yelled at again.
yeah.
No, and it's
So
all, it comes
yeah,
down to like, what is the lesson you're supposed to learn? right? And you are definitely not a quitter. Like you will do whatever you can to make something happen if you really, really want it. And that again is a lot to be admired. Okay, so we are supposed to be talking about today how to get the most out of your interviews. And I remember both in high school, you really started to get into this because you were the on-camera talent, and then you also got into kind of writing your own packages. Can you share with everybody what, when I say packages, what that means?
Yeah, so a package is basically like a piece you would see on the news, or basically it's considered like a feature, of, if you will. Basically, you're telling a story about a person, place, a thing, like anything that you find or that you're assigned to, and your job is to go in, interview the right people, ask the right questions, and ultimately put a story together that has to do with that. And I've been a part of like all different kinds of like processes for this. Like I started out on camera, where in high school I was pretty much like exclusively on camera.
Hmm.
And then as I got into college, I was like, oh, I'm curious about the editing side, and um, seeing how like the biggest thing about me is I love telling stories, right? And the any way I can do that, like I will. So the like that's where broadcasting kind of came into that, and like that's why like I stuck with this, because like I love storytelling. So, and like that, I feel like that's one of the best ways to do it, right? If you make like a documentary about something, or you make a feature about someone, or like an athlete, like you get to sit down with that person and the people that they're close to, and interact with them, and you get to talk, like you get to just tell their story. So I think that's been really cool. But yeah, like, and then by doing the editing and seeing that side, the production side of everything, it made me realize like, oh, I really like this too. So
Hmm.
if the on camera stuff doesn't work out, at least I have, I know I can do this behind the scenes too. So yeah, that's kind of how it translated into now. But yeah, I think the interview process, like interviewing people, is like a huge part of the storytelling process, because if you don't have good like sound bites from people, then like what's your story going to be, right? Like you can't just tell the story just from a like me talking, like as like doing a voiceover, right? Like you need other people to drive the story too. So I feel like like interviewing is a huge process of that.
I love that. I love that. Okay. And one of the things is that what I have found from the stories or the packages that I have watched from you, and you've interviewed quite like a span of people, right? You've interviewed famous athletes, college athletes, high school, right? Also like local hero type of things and just different things. I remember one interview you did. You actually interviewed a detective that was on Dateline, which I watch that show every week. And I'm like, oh my God, he's famous to me because he was on Dateline. And you're like, I
Yeah.
asked him if because you mentioned that. That was so funny. But my point is, with the stories, when I watch your packages going, and even now, like you told me the other night, hey, like watch on ESPN at this time because I did the video editing for this one thing. And what's cool is that every time I watch it, it makes such an impact, right? It's like I hear the story that you're telling. I get goosebumps because you're hitting on the particular points and you're pulling out from people what those inspirational or those impactful moments that led them to be and why you're interviewing them in the first place, right?
Right.
So I think that us in our industry, as coaches, course creators, or whatever, whether we have a podcast and we're interviewing people or doing some sort of a live interview or something like that, I think that's so important because people are going to watch or listen for a reason. So it's like, what is that reason? We need to figure out that you're having them on the show to begin with. And how do we pull this out of the people? So, my first question is, do you do any sort of research before the interview?
Yeah, I try to do as much research, like as much research as I can, before, and that's like where you get most of your questions from. I feel like one of the it's kind of a funny story. One of the features that I did in college was about a golfer for Florida State, and his on his bio, like I was looking for people, people's stories, and like trying to figure out like what I want to do a feature on, and so like in the class that I was in, we mainly did sports features and mainly like did features on athletes. So rightly so, it was just going through everybody's bios. The school did a good job of like saying things about the players. And one of the things about the that FSU golfer was that he did magic. So I'm like, oh, like this would be awesome if like we can do a feature about him playing golf and like he does magic on the side. Like how cool is that? So we show up to the interview. Like I have like a bunch of questions set. Like I'm ready. Like I'm like seeing like I'm envisioning how this feature is gonna go down. Like the camera work that we're gonna do and all this stuff. And then we get there, and like this is mid interview, and I bring up the magic thing, and he gives me a look, and, and he's like, what do you mean? He's like, magic, and I'm like, yeah, like you do magic, don't you? And then he was like, no. And I was like, well, that's what your bio says on the Florida State web. So like doing your research is super important because at the end of the day, like for a 20, a 18, 19, 20-year old, person in general, like there might not be a lot of stories on them. But if I would have maybe gone like down that extra path and been like, oh, like this guy magic like on Google, like that's like Google is super helpful. Like but I'll get into more of that later. But yeah, so if I would have maybe gone that extra step, I would have maybe realized like, oh, he doesn't do magic, or I would have maybe asked someone who could have confirmed it. But yeah, so that was mid interview, and then I was like, so like, do you have any other like do you have any other hobbies on the side? Like, is there anything else that you do? And he's like, oh, like he's like, I'm an artist. Like I love drawing and like all that stuff. So if I wouldn't have asked that, if I would have just been like, oh, like he doesn't do magic, like let's scrap this story, or oh, he doesn't do magic, like let's just do a generic feature about him. I wouldn't have found that piece.
Right.
Like I wouldn't have
So
found
hold
that.
on. Wait, where did you find the magic? And then he didn't do magic. So that
So
was like a big
so
typo.
so yeah, it was definitely. So I found it on Florida State's website, like on the bio of the player. They
Mm-hmm.
ask them questions like, do you have hobbies? Do you do this? And then I guess the kids, like he said that he likes listening to music, or he likes music, and whoever
Oh,
typed in the information said that like he liked magic. So I guess there was like like
oh
a
wait,
lost, it got lost in translation a little bit there. but
that's funny.
but it ended up working out because we were able to get that that aspect of him being an artist and how that translates into his game as a golfer.
Mm-hmm.
Is like the way he sees the courses, and the way he sees his shots. He's an artist, so he tries to manipulate his game to for that. And so yeah, so doing your research is very important. I've come to learn that. but but then it's all about the questions you ask too, and like
Mm-hmm.
how you formulate those questions based on the research. And if something goes wrong mid interview, how to kind of grind your gears
Transition.
in your brain a little bit, and try to put something together.
All right. So share us some of those pro tips on the questions to ask to get the most out of those interviews.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, like we just talked about, number one is doing your research. Like when you're interviewing someone, whether it's for a podcast or for a news story, or something, you got to do your research. Like you can't just show up and ask generic questions to the person. It'll be fine, but like you won't get the most out of the interview if you're not doing your due diligence, and finding cool things about the people and the places, and whatever events you're doing, like you're doing a story on. um I like, it's something I've come to learn like over the years. Like I used to just show up, and I have my generic questions for whoever, but I feel like these could have been so much better had I asked different questions. So doing the research, I also watch other people interview other people, and
Oh.
like see the questions that other people ask people. Like it's funny, the segment Hot Ones, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like it's a segment, it's a show on YouTube that this guy Sean Evans, he basically interviews celebrities while they're eating like hot wings. Like they have a wing, like chicken wings in a line, and they progressively get hotter as the interview
Oh
goes on.
gosh. So they start sweating along the
Yeah, so
way.
they start sweating. The wings are like thousands of and hundreds of thousands of Scoville, on the Scoville level, and these guys are like sweating it out while they're trying to ask these questions. But Sean Evans, he does a great job of like doing his research. Like he'll look somebody up, and like he'll look in their local newspapers and like try to find stories of somebody that a celebrity that grew up in his hometown, and like did a story on him. Like he'll find those things. Like he'll scroll through people's Instagrams and like find something from 6 years ago, and he's like, oh, and then he's like, oh, that's an interesting thing that they posted about, like, and then he'll ask about it in the interview, and it blows people's minds because people are like I thought you were just gonna ask me like whatever, like how my day's going and whatever. I didn't think
Right.
you would go this deep into into who I am, and like that it brings more of like a personal aspect to the interview too, because people are like, oh, this person did their research and this person cares, so now I'm gonna care in return and give them my full effort in answering these questions, and giving them like the pieces that they're looking for. So it's all about like building that personal connection, and that's like another huge thing. It's just building that connection, like for people who are going through interviews. Like they're just like, some people get really nervous in front of the camera, and they're just scared to like go through an interview. Even it's funny, even me, like before we went on this podcast, I was like, I'm a little nervous to go, and you're just like why are you nervous? Like we're just having a conversation. Like, and I think that's where like the term interview, like it gets blown out of proportion, because it's like, oh, it's an interview. Like it's not, like this isn't like a job interview. Like there's no pressure here. Like there's like, I'm not gonna, my whole life isn't gonna turn out a certain way because
Exactly.
because I mess up on a podcast. Like it's a personal connection. Like sometimes I forget that too, like as the person who's being interviewed. um but yeah, like, so building that personal connection and making sure that the person you're interviewing is comfortable is
Hmm.
super important as well. But yeah, and like I've obviously, like I work with your podcast. I've seen you do that as well, and like I like you're make when you're not talking about like the topics, like you guys make jokes, and like that's all a part of the interview. Like it's not just reading your questions off the paper and going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then
Right.
that's the interview's over. So I
Right.
think, yeah, that's the one of the biggest parts of it. And then
Well,
um
let me just stop you right there, because that's something that I've learned from you. Because I feel like you have this like natural ability to make people feel super comfortable. You're very approachable, right? And I think when you put in some of this personal thing, it almost takes the pressure off of them of having to be so perfect in talking about whatever skill that they bring to the table, or whatever you're really featuring them on, because you're interviewing them for a reason, right? And when you're able to talk about like what they do in their life, or about their family, or about whatever, it just lights them up, and it opens them up and relaxes them almost. And honestly, that is what makes the connection, not only with you interviewing the person, but with the audience that's watching. That's what makes the connection with those people and makes the interview that much better, because then it's like, oh, it's not this professional athlete that gets paid millions of dollars a year, has their name in the Hall of Fame, and you must have totally fangirled. I mean, I know you keep your cool pretty much, but going to interview some of these people, even some of my clients now that I always look up to, it's like, okay, I need to not fangirl right now, right? But I can see like, oh, they're human just like me. They put their, pants on one leg at a time, just like me, type of thing. So I think that's really great. And I think by adding the personal thing, really sets your interview apart from the next person that's just checking the boxes and going down just to get the content out.
right, yeah, the interview starts when you walk into the room and meet the person for the first time,
Hmm.
because you you run to the person, and it could, like, if you just like shake their hand and be like, all right, this is what we're doing, blah blah blah, you go and you sit down, ask them the questions, and leave. You're not going to get the same, like, in like, you're not going to get the same like emotion out of them. Like if you're nervous about thinking about your questions, and or like you're stressed out, people can see that. And it really translates into the interview as well. So if you go into the interview, like, I feel like you should, like, people should make it known that it's like, this isn't just, I'm reading questions to you. Like this is like how's your day going? Like um you see what happened here, like with this thing at this place, like just making like it could be small talk, but like at the end of the day, it's opening up, like you're already having a conversation before you're going into the interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it like I feel like that's just a huge like communication like skill to have, to be open to talking to everybody, before going into that. Like people feed off of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like that's a like a really big thing. And then another thing, like going into that, like another important skill to have is to not read off the paper when when you're doing your interview, right? Like it it's distracting. It gets distracting for someone who's trying to answer a question and look at you while you're answering a question, while you're looking down and trying to read your next question and remember your next question. So while you're doing so, like when you're doing your research and you write all your questions, like you should be memorizing those questions,
Hmm.
because like that it's just super important. Like it's super important because um like I said, people feed off of you, and if you're just reading at them, it's not going to come off the same as it's a conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said it so well the other day. It's a conversation. This isn't an interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's that's a kind of another big thing. But yeah, that's I'm sure I have a lot more.
Well, okay, so let's kind of flip it. So we're talking about us interviewing people and pulling out the questions. So, and that is one thing I will say on my end, right? Because I talk a lot about marketing and, how to get more leads, more sales, and all that stuff. That what I was doing to research is I would go to people's websites and I would go to their About Me section, right? And what I quickly discovered is that everybody's About Me section isn't really about them. It's about their journey to do what the thing that they sell,
Right.
right? It doesn't talk about them personally or just like maybe one sentence. So then I got to the point where it was kind of like, I don't even know where to get this stuff, right? Which is what led me in my podcast to have Michelle's Hot Minute, because then I'm able to just pull out like regular questions, like personal questions, to see different, like to see a different side of them. That's how that began, because I wanted my podcast to be something a little bit different. So if you're like, okay, similar to me, what other things might you suggest that maybe if they have like a one question they ask everybody or something like that, just to bring out this personal side, whether it be before the interview? And do you even would like, is it okay to ask them? Would it be okay if we talked about something personal, or how do we do that?
Yeah, so that's where it kind of gets tricky, because you kind of want to like you want to try to stay on task, right? Like with what you're doing the interview about. But it's also open to a conversation. So I would if I were to do that, I would probably mix it into like in between questions, and like as like like try to make a joke out of it and like see how they respond. And like and sometimes you get answers like that you use for your
Mm-hmm.
for your stories, your podcasts. You get answers out of that. And
Mm-hmm.
like it just like that's why I keep stressing, like it's not just asking the questions that you have written down.
Right.
Like and then another big thing is asking them is asking if they want to say anything at the end of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Like if like at the end of every interview, it's like it's something that is taught, like I've learned throughout high school, college. It's just at the end of your interview, ask the subject, is there anything else you want to add? Because
Mm-hmm.
there might not be something that you thought about or that you researched, or that if we're doing a feature on an athlete that and we're interviewing their best friend, then like and you ask like, oh, is there anything that like you think we missed on, that we're trying to talk about this person, and like is there anything else you want to add? Like there's some answers that you can get out of that. Like I did a feature on a track athlete at Florida State, and he like great runner. He was a sprinter. And we did this like great story on him, how he transferred into Florida State, and he He was injured in one of his seasons there, and it knocked him out for the season, and how like that kind of affected him like mentally, and his process of coming back. And then at the end of the interview, the person I was doing the interview with, he asked him, he's like, oh, I noticed like your tattoos, like your tattoos on your leg. Oh, like, can you tell us about that? His face lit up, and and like that just comes to like at the end of the interview when you're not thinking about, like, you're like, all right, the interview's done. Like there might be something this person still wants to talk about. So like, he's
Mm-hmm.
asking like, oh, is there anything you want to add? Oh, like I just got some new tattoos like a couple weeks ago. Like, can I talk about those? And we're like, sure,
Yeah.
like go for it. And then he like talked about the significance that the tattoo means to him, and like some, I think the tattoo was of like four role models in his life, and it was on his leg. And like as
Mm-hmm.
a runner, like your leg is like, that's your, it's like a pitcher's arm, like that's his, like,
His
that's his,
tool.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's cool, right? So like, yeah, for lack of a better term, but um yeah, so like asking those little questions, and that little piece that he was talking about ended up in the feature, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So like it's just the little things that, like, that's what makes me like love this process, and like love like talking to people and finding out people's stories. Is like, there might be something that people never talk to anybody about, but when you get the chance to talk to them, they'll open up to you, and they'll be like, oh, this thing's about me, like let me talk about this because I'm really passionate about this, and I really like this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I love this. Okay. So now we know as an interviewer what we're looking for, because what I'm hearing you say is to look beyond. And I know lately, like especially podcasts and things like that, sometimes we can't see like the whole person's body. Sometimes it's just literally the head, no neck, whatever. So we want to be observant. Now, if we're flipping the script, right? So now someone's interviewing us, and let's say not everybody has the amazing interview skills that you have, or we're learning today that we're going to implement and start doing ourselves. How can we either number one, provide them with questions to ask us, so it pulls out our personal stories that we want to share that go just beyond the skills that we have, or um, if they're not a very good interviewer, let's say with the questions, how can we embellish, I guess would be the good word, embellish on our responses so we can actually pull out our own story.
So you're saying, as the person who's being asked the questions,
Correct.
right? um yeah, I mean, I just, that it's kind of tough, but like I think it just goes back to, like, as the interviewee, like you you might feed off like an interviewer being nervous and stuff like that, but if
Mm-hmm.
if you're like, lively, and you have like a good, you know like you're in like the conversation with them, and you're like, you're cracking jokes in the interview, and you're bringing out, a new light to the interview, like that is a huge like trait for an interviewee to have.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes you might like return the favor and ask the interviewer a question like that, like things like that. It just like makes for a more of a conversation, and more of a personal touch to the interview. So yeah, I think that would be a big thing.
That's good advice. And I never thought of asking the question back. And that's a good thing, because I feel like we get into this pattern of question answer, and it's the conversation kind of as response to the question, but it's not a two-way conversation with the interviewee asking an interviewer,
Yeah.
right? So even a lot of people I know, a lot of people think I'm an extrovert, which when I did the test, I was like 49%. I was kind of in the middle, but more towards introvert. Okay. And a lot of people don't realize that. So I think that what happens, my whole point in saying this is that if you feel like, oh, I'm not very good, a very good conversationalist, or there's nothing special about me, or I don't really have a story to tell, you do. So the first thing I think is to really identify, like, kind of what makes you special, what makes you quirky, what makes you whatever. What do you do in your life? Whether you have kids, a spouse, a pet, or whatever, what is it that you do? Because someone can relate to something that you do. And then how can you turn that or relate it to? I remember in one of my coaching programs, we were talking about writing weekly emails. And my coach told me, make a list of everything you did, like going grocery shopping, going to Target, you took a plane ride, whatever it was, and talk about whatever situation happened to you. Because how many times are we somewhere and it's like, I don't know, there's a quirky person next to us or somebody who makes a stink about whatever at the store, right? And you're like, really, she exaggerated this. And like, how can we bring it back to business? And I think that's part of the storytelling. Like, you were in a circumstance, how did you overcome something that made you where you are today? And I think that's the cool thing, that if you really think about it, and you probably can insert where maybe there is none, or maybe you ask the interviewer a question that would then prompt them to automatically respond to something, and then you share your story. So I think there's all kinds of ways that you can do it on both sides. So remember, if you're being interviewed, you're being highlighted and you are the one being featured. So you want to be like someone who makes that connection, because that's the whole reason you're getting in front of someone else's audience, right? And you want to make sure that that connection is made, so it's well worth your time and exposure. Would you
Right.
agree with that?
No,
Right?
definitely. Yeah.
Okay, Anthony, is there anything else you'd like to share?
There you go. See?
You like how I transitioned
I
into
like
that?
it. You're applying it. Nice. Yeah. I mean, I think just overall, like the overall picture of being able to interview someone and get the most out of their story is just, you need to be adaptable. The like, if you write your questions down 1 through 10, something that you ask in question 2 might be talked about, something that you're trying to ask in question 8. So that goes back to memorizing like your questions, right? So like if you're like, oh, I have a question about that, I'm like, now that's question number 3, right?
Right.
So like, being able to be adaptable and being open to hearing different things that you might not have heard about, because like you might have a picture of how you want like to tell like a story, or how you want your podcast to go, right? But then it's not until like you're actually in the interview and somebody says something interesting, you need to be openly listening. And the way you do that is not by like thinking about like, oh, like this is the question I'm asking next and remembering it word for word. It's like actively listening and being able to adapt to like whatever they're saying. Because like I've definitely been in interviews where it's been like, oh, like I asked my second question. I'm like, looking down. I'm like, this is the answer to the next, like, or this is the next question I'm gonna ask. And then like sometimes like it might not have to do with what they just talked about. Like you're like switching topics completely. So like it's like learning, being adaptable. It opens you up to like a flow kind of, rather than more of a structured thing.
Love
Um,
it.
but yeah, that would be my last little piece of advice, I guess.
I love it. I love it. Okay, let's get into Michelle's hot minute. Okay, I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions. He knows not one of the questions I'm going to ask him, for the record. All right, ready?
I'm an overthinker, so
Okay, you got
let's
to
see how
be
this goes.
rapid, fast. Okay, don't think. What is your favorite thing about being a twin?
I think it's just having somebody always to be able to talk to.
What is your guilty pleasure?
Ooh, guilty pleasure. I listen to a lot of Michael Bublé.
Golf or
Like,
baseball?
that's a tough question.
I
Right
know.
now, right now, I would rather play golf than play baseball. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I can go into a whole minute of this, but
Favorite person that you've ever interviewed?
Ooh. Ooh. I interviewed a former MLB player, Placido Polanco. That was
Hmm.
because grew up watching him on TV and got to interview him, so that was cool.
Most famous person you met at ESPN?
Ooh,
I know, because you just
Mar-
came from that event and you
Mar-
met like
Marty
everyone.
Smith probably was the most famous person. I met a lot of people that day, but Marty Smith, he was just a great guy. Like I was able to shake his hand and talk to him for a little bit, so that was cool. I'm trying to be quick here.
What are some of your favorite holiday traditions that you did while growing up?
I don't know if it was the traditions, but just the fact that the family was always like, we might not have seen each other a lot throughout the year, but the fact that everybody knew like this is where we go for Christmas and this is where we go for Thanksgiving, like that tradition, I feel like was pretty cool. And then just I think the pajamas tradition, I like that tradition a lot.
Yeah, pajamas on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
We do Christmas Day at our house, so
Well,
I don't
Christmas
know.
Eve too.
Well, yeah. Well, do we wear pajamas to Christmas Eve?
Well, not too Christmas Eve, but
Right, right. Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, I get, yes. So my mother gives us matching pajamas Christmas Eve. So my side of the family gets that. And then Christmas Day, I remember the kids were little. They're like, do we have to change? Can we just stay in our pajamas? And I'm like, sure, stay in your pajamas all to Christmas Day. Okay, going back. Wrigley Field or Fenway Stadium?
Yeah, Wrigley.
Would you rather have a housekeeper or a personal chef?
Personal chef.
And who's your favorite parent?
I'm not answering.
Try to get you. Dad told me to ask that, by the way. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun,
That was
Anthony.
good. That was good. I was like thinking, like, first thing that came to my head, the first thing that came to my head when you asked that was, don't answer the question.
Good
I don't
answer.
have a favorite parent.
I know who your favorite parent is. That's okay. I won't tell Dad. Oh my gosh. Okay, I did want to ask you one thing before we go. I wanted to ask you two more things. Number one, when I mentioned fangirling, when you were around, because you're around some pretty famous people, like you called me the other day and you were like, so and so from the office said, hey, do you mind going and picking up this guy from the airport? And you were like, Mom, it was so casual, but it's like super famous. Like, how do you not fangirl?
I mean, I feel like at a certain point, it comes with working for the company. Like with this company, like I'm on like Zoom calls with people that I like grew up watching on TV, and I like you just have to kind of like go with the flow and just like not think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because then like if you get asked something and you're like thinking about the other person's on my Zoom call, like I don't know, it's just I just try not to think about it.
Right? Like more
Like
professional.
at the college football seminar I worked at, like all my heroes that I watched growing up on TV, like either playing or just doing broadcasting, like that was like a huge wave of just what do you call it, um what's the term that they use when not fangirling, but starstruck.
Oh,
That's
starstruck. There you go.
yeah,
Yes.
like you're obviously starstruck when you see like 50 people that like all at the same time, but like in a situation like that, it's just like you're like you're
You're one
here.
of them.
Yeah, like they're not expecting, like they're obviously expecting you to know who they are because like they're on TV, right? But
Right.
and the less awkward you make it, the more willing they are to talk to you. It's true. It's
It
true.
is. It
Because
is.
yeah, like I mean, if you're not like shaking and like all anxious, like because you're seeing them, like they're more willing to like to talk to you. So I feel like that applies to like if you see like some like a celebrity or somebody famous, like in like on a random day, like you can go up to them and or like don't go up, like sometimes don't go up to them, like, but you can just like admire them from a distance and just be like, oh cool, that's you. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like that's kind of what it's come to, which like it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like I wish I had more of that, like that starstruck, but I can't, like I can't
Right. Yeah, you can.
react, in that
Yeah.
in a certain way.
Get
So
to
yeah,
be a true professional. All
yeah,
right. This was so much fun, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
of course. I'm glad we did this. Like
Yeah.
we've been talking about it for a while, so I'm
Yeah.
glad we finally got to do it.
And I would love for you to come back and maybe chat a little bit more about some video impact, like editing for high impact. Like, would you be open to doing that?
Yeah, hopefully before the next 2 years.
All
Yeah.
right. And if people want to follow you, where can they find you?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Anthfern, ANTHFERN, and yeah, that's pretty much all
Yeah.
I use. But
Yeah. And of course, I'll always be mom bragging about any cool stuff that you have going on.
yeah,
So
you said you wouldn't do it today.
I know, I know. I held back. I'm very proud of myself. Did I embarrass you at all?
No, not at
Okay,
all.
good, good, good. All right. All right, there you have it. How to get the most out of your interviews. Definitely go check out Anthony. I'll drop where you can find him in the show notes. Thanks again, Anthony, so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, until next time, let's grow your business together.